Hello, my name's Brandon Stover.
Today, we're going to go over what sponsorships are, the types that you can do, what the industry standards are, and 9 steps to effectively monetize your podcast with paid sponsorships. Now, sponsorships are obviously deals that you and some other company make for you to promote their product on your podcast at the beginning or the middle of their episode. Sponsorships do love podcasts. The return on their investment is outstanding because sponsors know listeners trust their podcasts they listen to and will trust anything that you recommend as a host because they've come to know, like, and trust you. A good question to ask yourself before getting started with sponsors is, when should I bring on sponsors? What I advise is sitting down and thinking about the least amount of money it would take for you to dilute your podcast with sponsorships. Is that $100? Is that $500? Is that $1,000? Get that number in your head before you start reaching out to sponsors, because we know that eventually when you are putting ads in front of your listener base, some of them are going to be turned off by that, and you're going to dilute your own message and take away time that you could be promoting your own products or service. So you need to know the dollar amount that you'd be willing to do that for. So the industry standards for podcasting sponsorships are 3 different types. There's the pre-roll, the mid-roll, and the post-roll. So the pre-roll is prior to launching into your main content. The host will talk about the sponsor's product or service for about 15 seconds. A mid-roll is something that you have a little more flexibility with. Typically, your mid-roll is inserted somewhere between 40 to 70% mark of the podcast episode. And during these 60 seconds, the host will talk about the sponsor's product or service, often sharing a personal story if possible, and revealing some of the features and benefits of that product or service. The third type is a post-roll. This is typically between 15 and 30 seconds, and this is the last call to action your listeners will hear. Now, the podcast industry actually has some standards around how much money ads cost and how much sponsorships are going to be paying you. And they are based on a CPM metric, which really equates to cost per 1,000 listeners. So for every 1,000 listeners, you're going to get a certain dollar amount. And here are some of the industry standards. A 15-second pre-roll commands about $18 per 1,000 CPMs or listens. A 60-second mid-roll commands $25 per 1,000 CPMs. And a 30-second post-roll commands $10 per 1,000 CPMs. So in layman's terms, for every 1,000 people that you have listening to your podcast, you could get $18 for your pre-roll. You could get $25 for your mid-roll. And you could get $10 for your post-roll. Now, at this point, you may be asking, well, how do I know what my average listens are so I can determine my CPM rate? Well, what you do is you look at the download numbers of your episodes starting at 6 weeks out. Remember, you're guaranteeing a minimum number of listens to these sponsors, so you need to be confident that you're fulfilling your end of the bargain. Once you see that every episode is over a certain number of downloads by 6 weeks, that is your CPM. Now, we will cover 9 steps to effectively monetize your podcast with paid sponsorships. So step 1 is bringing on the right podcast sponsors. How do you go about finding podcast sponsorships? Well, the very first question to be asking yourself is, what is your niche? Start by creating a list of companies who make sense given your topic or niche. Think about the companies that currently market to your niche. And remember, bringing on the right sponsors means you feel comfortable with the product or service. You really shouldn't be bringing on a sponsor unless you've had some type of personal experience with the brand, product, or service that's being advertised. This might mean you've had some sort of walkthrough of a program, you've purchased it and used it yourself, or you've talked to others who've had personal experience with the company. Because at the end of the day, if you don't feel right about the product or service being advertised, and you haven't confirmed it's something your audience needs, then you shouldn't really be bringing that company on as a sponsor. So start by simply asking yourself these few questions. What products or services do I use every day that I love and that I know my audience could benefit from using? What products or services do I not use, but that I know my audience could benefit from using? And what sponsors are other influential podcasts in my industry or niche bringing on their shows? A well-crafted email to that sponsor could yield a partnership between you and that sponsor. So sit down and create your wish list of sponsors. At least 15 to 20 companies or products or services that you know would be great fit for your audience. Once you have that list, we start step 2, which is actually reaching out and building a relationship with these sponsors. The first thing to think about before reaching out is, what are the important points advertisers want to know in order to pay you money to put an ad in your podcast? Well, the first point is, who is your audience? Not just the demographic, but also those psychographics, those pains, those desires, those things that they fear. They need to know these things as well, just so they know exactly who they are talking to and who they're promoting to. The second thing is the number of people that they will get their message in front of and how engaged your listener base actually is. The third important point advertisers want to know is they want to see some proof from past successful marketing campaigns. So show them some things that you've advertised, or show them some testimonials from your podcast listeners of how great your show is and how connected they are. These are things that sponsorships want to see in order to know that they're going to get an ROI on their campaigns. Now, once you have those important points that advertisers want to know, then it's time to actually reach out to that list that you made before and email them. Links to their emails or promotion materials can often be found on their websites. So just go to their websites, find those, and send an email with these important points that advertisers want to know. Now, as you start reaching out to these sponsors, you want to keep in mind that you are building a relationship with your sponsor. So get to know them, their business, and their product or service through a Zoom call or several email conversations if that's more convenient for them. Do your due diligence and search for them on YouTube for reviews, Google for product info, and spend some time understanding how their product or service impacts those who invest in it. And also know and understand the benefits and impact of their product or service so that you're much more well equipped to talk about it in an attractive way on your podcast ads. Now, once we're reaching out and we're building a relationship with these sponsors, step 3 is to over-deliver to them to keep them for the long term. So over-deliver on your promise to your sponsors. This will set you apart from other podcasters and make them want to work with you for a lot longer. Now, examples of ways to do this: give them more downloads than they expected for their sponsored episodes, include an added email mention of their product or service to your email list, or do a few social media shout outs for the company. These are all things that you can do as an added on bonus to just putting your ad in, say, the pre-roll, mid-roll, or post-roll sections. So step number 4 in effectively monetizing with paid sponsorships is actually creating your ad packages. Once we have the interested sponsors and we've reached out, we're in communication, now it's time to let them know what your download numbers are and what it will cost for them to sponsor an episode. Along with this, you'll want to share an agreement and a breakdown of what they'll get as part of the sponsorship package. And here you need to really think about this. What do you want your sponsorships to look like, and how do you want them to run? Setting up expectations and letting sponsors know upfront exactly how you run your sponsorships is critical to the success of your campaign. Once you have your packages set, stick to it. Don't back down. Do what you think is fair, and only back down if you think it's a good reason to do so. Now, at some point, your download numbers may be able to ask for a higher price because they've gone over the industry standard CPM rate. And at that point, it's time to go back to the negotiation table with your sponsor and start increasing the amount you receive per episode. But for now, let's just get your sponsorship packages created and outlined. How much will you be charging? Go to those CPM industry standards, start looking at that, look at your download numbers, and start setting expectations for your sponsors. Now, once you have these packages created and you have an interested sponsor, it's time to move on to step 5, which is to get a signed agreement. Always a good idea to have a signed agreement that states what the campaign will include. You want to have things like run dates, the agreed upon rate, and any dates for those payments, any talking points, and approved reads that will be done in your podcast ad. Now, you can set up a timeline when you want reads approved, such as 1 or 2 months ahead of time, because this is really the time you should be thinking about what your sponsorship workflow should look like. And it's critical to set these expectations at this point in time, because if your sponsor doesn't know any different, they may be sending you updated talking points or requests for edits throughout the run. So let them know in advance how far ahead you would like things approved, and stand strong on this. And if any requests for updates do come through, remind them of the agreement that you set up ahead of time. Now, the 6th step, and really looking at this negotiation aspect, is following up with your sponsors. So once you've engaged in the setup conversation, meaning both parties have agreed upon on the sponsorship actually happening and they've sent you the agreement form, signed and dated, you're likely to have a lot of follow-up in order to successfully lock in this campaign. And until you have a signed agreement, payment, and talking points, continue to follow up over and over and over again. Really, this is your responsibility. You're the one getting paid here. Some of these email conversations could probably include 50 back and forth communications before you actually get down to the nitty-gritty of each detail for these sponsorship ads. So you must be following up and you need to stay on top of this. Once you've found your sponsors, you've gotten that signed agreement around, you've agreed on a price and everything's ready. Now it's time to actually create your ads and deliver those. So in step 7, we're going to create your ad reads. These are the things that you're actually reading on your podcast to promote the product or service that your sponsor has. And here's some notes on creating reads. You should request a minimum of at least 10 talking points. So these are some benefits, some things that you can be saying in your reads about the product or service that your sponsor has. Once you get these talking points, it's time for you to actually create a script for yourself, create a script read that is in your voice for your audience. So think about your own talking points, some of the things that you would like to add in, and really craft it for your audience and their pains, pleasures, fears, and all of those psychographics that we have been recording since the beginning. Another really good practice is to look at what other shows in your niche are doing. So there may be a special way that they are crafting their reads, say in their pre-roll or their mid-roll, that really resonates with your audience. So you may have a way of doing it that is a spin-off of that so that you can really get some effective results with your sponsorship ads. An example of this is Andrew Warner's Mixergy. He basically does his advertisements right in the middle of the show, his mid-rolls. But he does more of a read where he talks about personally using this product in his own experience and then asking his guests that he's interviewing what experience they've had with the product or service. And this gives a really natural transition and doesn't have that break of all of a sudden now we listen to a pre-recorded ad. He's actually doing it live during the episode. There. Some other good notes on creating your reads. Definitely add in your personality. Obviously, your audience knows and likes and trusts you as the podcast host. And so when you go ahead and put your stamp of approval on there, if you are doing these reads with your personality, they're going to be more likely to take action on that advertisement. Also, tell some of your stories, share your personal experiences with this product or service, or tell your audience how this product or service can make your life better as the podcast host. Again, just remember that this is your show, so make these ads how you want them to be. That's going to resonate with your audience, and that's really going to help you deliver your message as well. Once you've actually created your reads, go ahead and send it over to your sponsor for them to review and approve. And be sure to always put a deadline on this. So every time that you send over a read, say it needs to be approved by this date so that changes and stuff aren't happening before the time that you are actually running this ad. Once we've actually created our ads, our 8th step is to actually deliver. So go ahead, record your ads, put them into your episodes, get them out to the world, and then be sure to listen back once you've inserted your reads to make sure everything flows the way you want it to. And as we talked about before, if you're going to be doing live reads, which some hosts do, then make sure you have your notes or unique read by when it comes time to hit that record button. Now, after we have actually delivered our advertisement into the episode, it's gone out to the world. Our last and final step is to actually follow up with your sponsorship again. It's especially important to follow up with them towards the end of the run of their ads. You should not only be doing this to check in to see how the sponsorships are actually going for them, how much return that they're getting on their investment, but also to see if they'd like to continue sponsoring your show. So being in constant communication from the beginning, the middle, and the end of running this sponsorship ad is really going to help solidify that relationship between you and the sponsor, and hopefully they can be a long lifetime sponsor for your podcast. So that finishes up the 9 steps to effectively monetize with paid sponsorships.